Hello, my name is Steve Pierce, and I would like to explain everything to you today about the topic of tongue piercings. Basically, everything you need to pay attention to. The care, the differences, and everything you need to know about the topic. Watch the video closely, and then you'll be well informed. First of all, of course, a small legal notice. We are not providing medical advice here, but merely a general consultation on the topic and some information. So I have, of course, written down some notes because I have gathered so many questions that we actually receive every day regarding tongue piercings. I can't remember all of them. That's why I made a little list. I would like to jump right into the first topic, which is a question that comes up very, very often and always makes me smile a little. Specifically, a commonly spoken myth among many concerned parents about losing taste buds. This is a topic we encounter very, very often. Can I lose my taste buds with a tongue piercing? Well, first of all, I have to say that I have had 6 of them, so I can speak about this very well. This myth is not entirely correct. Why? Basically, taste buds are these small papillae on the tongue. You have to imagine these little buds that sometimes hurt when they are inflamed. These are called taste buds. We have several regions for sweet, sour, salty, and bitter, and the body automatically renews these areas. Every 9 to 12 hours, these buds are automatically swallowed down with saliva, and the body forms new ones. There are many, many thousands on the tongue, and those are the taste buds. Losing them with a tongue piercing is not really possible. Where this myth comes from is easily explained. Basically, imagine that you have to think of these taste buds like a mushroom. At the top is the taste bud, and at the bottom, small nerve endings come together. This root and these nerves bundle together and then run along the sides of the tongue at the bottom. If you don't pierce these, and a lot has to go wrong for that to happen, nothing happens at all. Well, I know people who almost bit off their tongue in a car accident and they can still taste. So this myth, I would like to ask you to just leave it out. That's almost impossible. That's nonsense. So what is also asked very frequently is, of course, can I smoke afterwards? As a former smoker and now a proud non-smoker, I have to say, of course not. We cannot prevent it. I cannot forbid you. Hopefully, most of you are grown up enough. Smoking naturally introduces harmful substances, and fresh wounds do not react well to these toxins. Therefore, it is advisable to avoid it. At least a good smoker, obviously, won't be able to last 2 to 4 weeks. What you make of it is up to you. However, don't be surprised when smoking. If you smoke, you may notice some light yellow mucus coming out from below. These are secretions from all the nicotine that I excrete in the wound. The body eliminates this. It's like a wound secretion, and it can occur very frequently, and of course it can become inflamed. This also brings us to the topic of the yellow substance that often comes out. It is normal wound secretion as long as the tongue is not completely swollen, red, warm, and painful, and then if yellow substance appears, it would be pus. Otherwise, it's just wound secretion. It's important to remember that you shouldn't worry as long as you're piercing, and this applies to any piercing isn't thick, red, warm, and painful. Everything is fine. A little swelling is normal for the tongue, and so on. Basically, one can say as a rule of thumb that after the piercing, if it swells less, it is not a problem. In most cases, it does swell. The first 3 days are usually quite swollen. There's nothing you can do about it. Just get used to this familiar feeling while eating. It usually feels like this for 1,000 when you push the food back or want to eat something. After 3 days, it slowly starts to swell down. In the first week, it is still a bit swollen in the morning after getting up and decreases a little more throughout the day. If you have to talk a lot, it swells a bit in the evening. But after a week, the primary healing, the first phase, is actually completed. It is important to note that every piercing takes about 6 months to a year to heal completely. From a medical standpoint, even if you don't feel anything after a week, the piercing channel inside has not yet healed. The tongue is now a small exception. Mucous membranes heal very quickly. Generally, I would say that after 2 or 3 months, the issue is simply resolved. However, it is still not healed after a week. This is very important. Now let's move on to the topic of initial placement. There is a bit of debate about this. Generally, except for people with a very thick tongue, we usually use an 18mm plug. The standard is 1.6mm thick, and we make it because this plug can always be left in, so it doesn't need to be shortened after several weeks. I still have these plugs in, except for the front one, after more than 25 years. If someone has a very thick tongue, some studios generally use 20 or 22 gauge jewelry and then switch it out. They tell people that after several weeks, they can change it. However, there is a very important issue. Please do not make the jewelry too short. I always say that the shortest we should use would be 16 millimeter. Why? People often come to us and say, look, it's really long, and push against it from below. Of course, the plug is then long. But people forget one thing. When I stick my tongue out and press against it, the tongue is thin. However, people forget about the 1000. When I have my tongue in my mouth, the tongue is not thin. Instead, it becomes up to 3 times thicker. If the tongue is positioned in my mouth area and the barbell is too short, the ball can get pulled in either from the top or the bottom, and we have already experienced that. Then we had to cut out plugs because people had put a tongue plug in. And of course, whenever the tongue was in the mouth, the ball slipped into the piercing channel. The basic rule is that as long as you have a dip at the top, a hollow where the ball presses in when you stick out your tongue, if this hollow is still there, the plug is too short or the tongue is still swollen. Yes, my rule of thumb is not shorter than 16 mm. Yes, I have one, and you can leave it in if it doesn't bother you. It's best to leave it in. What also comes up very often is that I have granulation tissue. I really don't like that word at all. In fact, this is fundamentally the case with every piercing. The body wants to form a kind of protective function. With a standard piercing, it creates a callus around the puncture channel, and in simple terms, the body wants to protect the piercing. That's why the body forms a callus. When it comes to the ear, people come to take a look, and there is excess flesh growing, so please remove this word. I don't know which expert put this word on the internet. Wild meat is a keloid. A keloid never goes away on its own and must be surgically removed. With ears, it is usually blister-like fluid pockets. With the tongue, it can sometimes actually be a kind of fleshy growth. At the bottom, it is usually normal to have a hardened edge. This often occurs, as mentioned, due to the protective function. It is normal to see a small hardened rim around the plug when you look at it from the bottom. If the plug is too short, it can sometimes happen that the body actually forms a kind of growth. I have seen this maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire career. It can be removed, but it would have to be cut, and it can happen, but it is very rare. So, what else do we have? I have been consuming dairy products for too short a time. This is of course related to care, which I will get to shortly. A common question is, does it hurt? Well, fundamentally, this question can never be answered by anyone, as everyone experiences pain differently. I always say jokingly that men are usually the weaker link. We are the ones who often suffer more or even die. Keyword, man flu. Basically, a piercing is one of the least harmful piercings to get. The piercing itself is one of the least painful piercings there are. The healing process is uncomfortable. The first week is tough, and the first 2 or 3 days are a bit annoying. I feel a bit out of sorts because I can't talk and can't eat, but a tongue piercing is one of the harmless piercings. The question can also be asked, can it be numbed? In fact, a tongue piercing can be somewhat numbed, as it is a mucous membrane piercing, and there are surface anesthetics available for mucous membranes in the mouth area. For other piercings, it is usually nonsense. It is generally possible to numb the mucous membranes with a spray. So yes, it is possible. What types are there? Well, basically, of course, the standard tongue piercing in the middle. There are also people who have piercings on the right or left, but these take a bit longer to heal and hurt a bit more because the tongue consists of 2 muscles, and with the middle tongue piercing, I pierce exactly in the center. If I go in from the side, I also pierce through the muscle, and that was personally almost more uncomfortable for me. The kind of muscle soreness I had in the first few days actually hurt quite a bit. It was like a muscle soreness 1000. And even today, when I take them out after 25 years, I can leave the middle one out for a very long time. The outer ones on the right and left usually grow back very quickly due to the muscle contraction of the tongue. Then there is, of course, the scoop, which can grow out. And there is the so-called snake eye at the front, the tip of the tongue. It's just across the front of the tongue tip. It can be a bit annoying when talking at first, but it gets better. 1000 teeth. That's also a commonly discussed topic. Yes, a tongue piercing can damage the taste buds if the piercing constantly hits against the teeth. I can sometimes, when I talk, I actually had 6 of them at my peak. I had to relearn how to speak because I wouldn't pierce anyone as far forward as my tongue piercing is, since I actually have to learn to speak English differently. I got stuck at the beginning, which is why I had to learn to articulate my words more clearly. And because it is so far forward, it constantly hits my teeth. Therefore, maintaining a certain level of basic hygiene is very important. If I already have poor oral hygiene and constantly damage my tooth enamel, there is obviously a greater risk of damaging the tooth or teeth. The danger exists. I am 25 years old, knock on wood, and I have never broken a tooth from biting down, nor do I have any fillings or crowns. My original teeth are all in great shape, but that is also a bit of genetics. For those who already have bad seams, yes, that can happen. And above all, what often happens is that the gum tissue at the bottom can recede quite a bit. You should please observe this. And then you should really, yes, dental care is very important, and keep an eye on the age at which one is allowed to get pierced. We generally do not pierce anyone under 14 years old. But theoretically, it is possible with a consent form starting from 14. The older, the better, 16, 18. What else do I have on my list? Teeth, anesthesia. Do I have pain? Yes, I do too. Well, then let's move on to the topic of care. Basically, with us, every customer receives a care sheet. It provides a detailed explanation of how to care for it, what to pay attention to, how to notice an infection, and so on. And of course, we have our Steve Pierce app, which I can also recommend everyone to download. It's available in the App Store and on Google Play. Just search for Steve Pierce and then you will find my app. And there you will have corresponding videos for all piercings like this one. You can always write to us or contact us if you have questions via WhatsApp or through the app. You have all the information and everything consolidated. So very important, care. We generally recommend using a regular Listerine mouthwash as it is the most readily available. Simply use it 2 to 3 times a day for care. Very important, not too often, because you have a certain oral flora, and if you are constantly rinsing, it may damage the oral flora. Especially for those who smoke a lot, it is better to rinse with clear mineral water instead of rinsing constantly after every cigarette. Otherwise, you will damage the oral flora, which can be harmful to wound healing. The oral flora actually helps with wound healing. If you damage it, it hinders the healing process. Otherwise, it is important, as mentioned, no dairy products. It is important here to avoid fresh milk. I always say that this white water we now call milk is no longer real milk. There are no milk bacteria in it anymore because they are the problem. Milk bacteria feel right at home. It is a living organism. I once experienced this myself when I forgot my labre and drank fresh milk. That night I ended up with a very swollen lip, pulsating and warm. They simply felt really comfortable, and therefore no fresh dairy products. 2001. If possible, also leave out yogurt if it's unclear. Just skip it. But theoretically, white water in coffee is fine. Yes, Listerine, as mentioned, 2 to 3 times a day. Spicy foods and fruit acids are not bad, but I advise against them. They sting and hurt. You will also notice that when you feel a bit fresh, your tongue becomes very sensitive. Sometimes you also get a colored coating, depending on whether you drink coffee, which can turn black, or Listerine, which might be a bit green. These buds. The body focuses the wound healing on the piercing, which is why it stops renewing these taste buds. And that's why it can become a bit of a fuzzy tongue, like when you're sick, and the discoloration can be natural. Brushing your teeth and using toothpaste can be very painful at first, so a little burning is okay, but what I always found much more important is that when it heals, the tip of the tongue starts to itch. I then scratched or itched a bit with the toothbrush because it really tingles at the tip of the tongue when it heals. Otherwise, it is possible that the lymph nodes may swell a bit during the healing process here or here. This is completely normal because the body is simply working, and then the body produces lymph fluid. So lymph is always a sign that something is being transported and is working. It's not wrong for the tongue piercing to rub against the palate, whether it's on the top or bottom. That can happen too. By the way, here's a tip. I once had a ball with a glitter stone polished. I really regretted it because those balls with the glitter stone on top rubbed against my palate so much that my tongue and palate were like a bruise, making it impossible to even eat plain white bread. It hurt so much. One of the most disgusting pains I have ever experienced. If you are used to it, start with a normal silver ball. You can also use plastic balls to protect your teeth so you don't damage the lower teeth as much. That might also be an option. Yes, as I said, lymph nodes can rub either below or above. They are swollen for the first 3 days and then slowly go down. That is normal. After a week, it should be fine. And what you should definitely keep in mind is to avoid any foreign bodily fluids, whether it's saliva from your partner or anything else. Please, if possible, avoid other bodily fluids as well. Yes, because naturally foreign bacteria do not get along well with the piercing. If it should become inflamed, it's important to always go to the doctor in case of doubt, of course. Don't worry, something like the tongue doesn't rot away. You don't need to be afraid of that. If you react in time, nothing else will happen. What you can do, please do not chew on it, is use chlorhexidine solution or beta-isodona mouthwash. This is then, if it should be inflamed, I believe that is not, please do not pin it down. The green or blue, I think the green is for the mouth. Just rinse it out. Otherwise, if in doubt, always go to the doctor. He should prescribe you appropriate antibiotics or something, and then that's it. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to write through our Steve Pierce app, which you can find in the App Store. There you have a contact field. Otherwise, I hope I was able to help you a bit with this. Feel free to subscribe to this channel on YouTube, also use and so that I can make even more of these videos. I will be creating similar videos for all other piercings in the near future. Subscribe to the channel, follow us, and otherwise have fun with your tongue piercing. If you have any questions, feel free to write to us. See you soon, my dear. Steve Pierce, I bid you farewell.